They believed no help would arrive. Then a human warship roared out of the void. The last signal. The asteroid mining station tumbled through space like a dying star, its hull bleeding atmosphere and hope in equal measure. Commander Sarah pressed her face against the cracked viewport, watching debris spiral away into the endless dark. 3 days ago, this had been home to 12,000 miners and their families. Now it was a tomb. Human, came the voice behind her, soft and melodic despite the translator's mechanical overlay. The children are asking for food again. Sarah turned to face Al, her closest friend among the survivors. The alien's crystalline skin had dulled from its usual bright blue to a sickly gray, a sure sign of stress and malnutrition. 4 thin arms gestured helplessly at the makeshift shelter they'd built in the station's emergency bay. "How many ration packs do we have left?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. 14, maybe 15 if we split the damaged ones. Al's large, compound eyes reflected the emergency lighting like fractured mirrors. "At current rationing, that gives us 2 days, 3 if the adults stop eating entirely." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. 2 days. The hegemony fleet wouldn't return to check for survivors for at least a week, assuming they bothered to check at all. There were a lesser species in their eyes, barely worth the mining contracts that had brought them here in the first place. She moved through the shelter, past huddled families of crystal-skinned beings who watched her with desperate eyes. They were peaceful by nature, their entire culture built around harmony and collective survival. They had no concept of warfare beyond the ancient stories their elders told. When the hegemony raiders had come demanding tribute, the miners had tried to negotiate. The raiders had responded with plasma fire. Sarah, a small voice tugged at her jumpsuit. She looked down to see Al's youngest daughter barely reaching Sarah's knee. The child's skin flickered with faint colors, hunger pangs, her translator helpfully noted. "Are the other humans coming to help us?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Sarah knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the child. Around the shelter, others had gone quiet, all listening for her answer. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah said honestly. She'd been the only human on the station, hired as a technical consultant because her species had a reputation for creative problem-solving. Now she was the only thing standing between these people and certain death. "But you sent the message, didn't you?" Al approached, speaking quietly. "To your military." Sarah nodded. She'd managed to jury-rig a quantum comm burst just before the raiders destroyed the main communications array. A single, desperate plea for help broadcast toward human space, over 300 light-years away. But she hadn't told the full truth, that even if the message got through, no human ship could reach them in time. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage, their fleets small and scattered. The Terran Defense Force had maybe 30 warships total, most of them patrol vessels barely larger than shuttles. And this far out in hegemony space, they'd never risk an international incident for one human and a bunch of lesser species. A tremor ran through the station as another piece of debris broke away. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making everyone's stomach lurch. Sarah ran quick calculations in her head. At this rate of decay, they had maybe 18 hours before the life support systems failed entirely. "I need to check the reactor," she announced, grabbing her toolkit. It was busy work, really. The reactor was running fine on emergency power, but she needed time to think to find some solution her training hadn't prepared her for. The reactor chamber was blessedly empty, filled only with the steady hum of machinery and the distant groans of a dying station. Sarah sat heavily on a maintenance crate and buried her face in her hands. She'd been in bad spots before. 3 tours with the Colonial Marines, fighting pirates in the outer systems. But this was different. This wasn't about her own survival. It was about 847 innocent beings who'd done nothing wrong except trust that the universe had some measure of fairness in it. Her comm unit crackled with static, then cleared. "Sarah," Al's voice sounded strained, "you need to see this." Sarah's blood went cold. Had the hegemony ships returned? She ran through the corridors, dodging floating debris and emergency cables. The other survivors were crowded around the viewport, their crystalline faces reflecting something Sarah couldn't identify. "What is it?" she asked, pushing through to the front. Al pointed with one thin arm toward a section of space that looked empty to Sarah's eyes. "There," she whispered. "Do you see it?" Sarah squinted, then activated her helmet's optical enhancers. At first there was nothing. Then, like a mirage resolving into reality, she saw it. A ship. But not just any ship. This vessel was massive, easily 3 times the length of the hegemony raiders that had attacked them. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in angular plates that seemed to drink in the starlight. Weapon ports lined its sides like the eyes of some predatory beast, and engine nacelles glowed with barely contained energy. "Is that?" Al's voice trailed off in wonder. Sarah's mouth went dry as she read the designation painted on the ship's bow in crisp white letters. TDF Indomitable. It was a human warship. Not just any human warship, but one of the Titan-class dreadnoughts, the most powerful vessels in the Terran fleet. Ships so new that half the galaxy didn't even believe they existed. "Incoming transmission," announced the station's damaged AI system. The viewport shimmered, and suddenly Sarah was looking at a human face. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. His uniform bore the insignia of a Terran admiral. "Mining station, this is Admiral of the Terran Defense Force vessel Indomitable. We received a distress call. Are you in immediate danger?" Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Behind her, she heard the survivors beginning to weep, not with despair, but with something they'd thought lost forever. Hope. The impossible arrival. Admiral's weathered face filled the crackling transmission, his gray eyes taking in the devastation visible through the station's viewports. Sarah could barely find her voice. "Admiral, this is Commander Sarah, Colonial Technical Advisor. We have 847 survivors aboard a critically damaged mining station. Life support is failing, and we're down to less than 2 days of food." She paused, still unable to believe what she was seeing. "Sir, how did you get here so fast?" His expression didn't change, but Sarah caught something flickering in his eyes, perhaps approval at her direct report despite the circumstances. "That's classified for now, Commander. What's your immediate situation?" Behind Sarah, Al stepped forward, her crystalline features catching the light from the transmission. "Admiral," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I am Elder Al of the Mining Collective. We did not expect help to come. Humans are not known for venturing so far into hegemony space." Stern expression softened slightly as he looked at the alien woman. "Elder Al, the Terran Defense Force has a policy regarding distress calls. We don't abandon people to die in the dark, regardless of their species or location." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd served with the TDF for 6 years before taking the civilian consulting position, and she'd never heard that policy stated so definitively. The Terran government was usually more diplomatic about such matters. "Sir," she said carefully, "what about the hegemony? This is their territorial space. If they find a human dreadnought here." "Let me worry about the politics, Commander." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Right now, I need a full damage assessment. Can you get me technical readouts on your life support, structural integrity, and population distribution?" Sarah nodded, already moving toward the nearest working terminal. As she called up the data, she caught fragments of conversation from the survivors behind her. Their language was musical, but the translator gave her the emotional context. Disbelief, joy, and desperate hope mixing together in ways that made her chest ache. "Structural integrity is at 32% and falling," she reported. "We lost main power 3 days ago when hegemony raiders destroyed the primary reactor. Running on emergency fusion cells that'll last maybe 6 more hours. Atmosphere is leaking from 17 hull breaches, and artificial gravity is down to 60% efficiency." She paused, looking at the life signs monitor. "Population breakdown, 623 adult, 224 juveniles. All human crew except myself were killed in the initial attack. We're rationing food, but—" She stopped, not wanting to voice the obvious. "Understood. We're moving to dock with your station now. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures." The transmission cut out, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. Around her, the survivors began talking excitedly among themselves. For the first time in 3 days, there was actual hope in their voices. "Sarah," Al approached, placing one delicate crystalline hand on her shoulder. "How is this possible? Your message was sent only 3 days ago. No ship could travel 300 light-years so quickly." Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. The fastest human ships can barely manage 50 light-years per day, and that's pushing their drives to dangerous limits. Unless—" she trailed off, a wild thought occurring to her. Unless what? Al's compound eyes focused intently on Sarah's face. Unless they were already out here, but that doesn't make sense either. The Indomitable is one of only 5 Titan-class dreadnoughts in the entire human fleet. They wouldn't risk it on a deep space patrol this far from human territory. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the massive warship maneuvering with surprising grace for something so large. Its hull bristled with weapons she couldn't even identify. Rail guns, plasma cannons, missile tubes, and other systems that looked almost alien in their advanced design. Incoming shuttles, announced the station's AI. Docking Bay 7 is compromised, redirecting to Emergency Bay 12. Sarah felt the station shudder as docking clamps engaged. Within minutes, the airlock cycled, and the first human faces she'd seen in months appeared in the emergency bay. They were TDF Marines, their powered armor gleaming despite the harsh conditions. But what struck Sarah most was their leader, a woman about her own age with lieutenant stripes and eyes that held the same impossible confidence she'd seen in Admiral. "Commander," the lieutenant asked, removing her helmet to reveal short black hair and sharp features. "I'm Lieutenant Maya, Terran Marines. We're here to get you people out." The word people wasn't lost on Sarah. The lieutenant had included the in that designation without hesitation, something that would have been politically sensitive even among humans just a few years ago. "Lieutenant, we have 847 survivors, including over 200 children. Some of the adults are injured and may need medical support during transport." "Understood. We brought medical teams and enough transport capacity for 1,200. Nobody gets left behind." As spoke, more Marines flowed into the bay, but these weren't the bulky combat units Sarah expected. Instead, they moved with practiced efficiency, setting up medical triage areas and evacuation staging points. Several approached the survivors with medical scanners, working through translators to assess injuries and nutritional deficiencies. Sarah watched in amazement as one Marine knelt beside Al's daughter and began treating her malnutrition symptoms with gentle precision. The child's crystalline skin began to brighten almost immediately as the medical injections took effect. "Sir," one of the Marines called out, "we're reading massive structural failure throughout the station. We need to move fast." As if summoned by his words, a deep groan echoed through the hull, and everyone felt the artificial gravity waver again. Emergency lights flickered as power systems began failing in cascade. "All right, people, let's move," his voice cut through the noise. "Medical cases first, then families with children. Everyone else stays calm and follows the marked evacuation routes." The evacuation proceeded with military precision, but Sarah found herself lingering near the viewport, staring out at the Indomitable. Something was bothering her about the whole situation, something beyond the impossibly fast response time. "Commander," Al appeared beside her. Most of the other had already been evacuated, but she'd stayed behind with the final group. "What troubles you? We are saved." Sarah nodded slowly. "We are, but Al, I've been in the military. I know how these things work. The Terran government doesn't risk its most powerful warships on rescue missions, especially not in hostile territory. There's something else going on here." Through the viewport, she could see more human ships, smaller vessels that had been hidden in the Indomitable's sensor shadow. Cruisers, destroyers, and something that looked like a hospital ship. An entire battle group. "This isn't a rescue mission," Sarah whispered, the realization hitting her like cold space. "This is an invasion fleet." Part 3, The Hidden Truth. The evacuation shuttle's interior was cramped but comfortable, designed to accommodate multiple species. Sarah sat between Al and several other survivors, watching through the viewport as station finally succumbed to its structural damage. The mining facility broke apart in slow motion, pieces spinning away into the void like the dying embers of hope. "Commander, report to the bridge," came Admiral's voice over the comm system. Sarah squeezed Al's crystalline hand reassuringly. "I'll be back soon. They probably just need a debrief on what happened here." But as she made her way through the Indomitable's corridors, Sarah realized this was no ordinary rescue vessel. The passages were wide enough to accommodate multiple species, with environmental controls that could adjust atmosphere composition in real time. The crew she passed wasn't entirely human either. She spotted at least 3 different alien species working alongside TDF personnel. The bridge doors slid open to reveal the most advanced command center Sarah had ever seen. Holographic displays showed tactical information across multiple star systems, and the crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people preparing for war. Admiral stood at the center of it all, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied a three-dimensional star map. When he saw Sarah, he gestured for her to approach. "Commander, I need to ask you some questions about the attack on. The more details you can provide, the better we can respond to the situation." Sarah nodded, but her eyes kept drifting to the tactical displays. She could see fleet movements, supply lines, and what looked like invasion routes spreading across dozens of systems. "Sir, can I ask what we're responding to exactly?" His gray eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. The Hegemony Accords were signed 23 years ago, establishing territorial boundaries and trade agreements between the major galactic powers. 3 days ago, when Hegemony raiders attacked, they didn't just commit piracy. They broke the accords by attacking a station with human personnel. "One human," Sarah pointed out, "me, and I was just a technical consultant." The law doesn't distinguish between military and civilian personnel in this context. An attack on any human citizen is considered an act of war. His voice was level, but Sarah detected something underneath, perhaps satisfaction. She looked at the star map again, noting the positions of human fleets throughout the sector. "Sir, these ships—" They weren't deployed after the distress call. They've been in position for weeks, maybe months. "Very observant, Commander," turned to face her fully. "The truth is, we've been monitoring Hegemony activities in this sector for some time. Their raiding has been escalating, and several non-aligned worlds have requested Terran protection. Your distress call simply gave us the legal justification we needed to act." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The survivors, they don't know about this, do they? They know they've been rescued by humans who responded to their need. That's all they need to know for now. His tone suggested the conversation was over, but Sarah pressed on. "Admiral, with respect, these people trusted me. They trusted humans. If they find out they were just a convenient excuse for military action—" "Commander," his voice carried a warning, "you've been away from military service for 18 months. Perhaps you've forgotten that sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Sarah realized that every crew member within earshot was watching the exchange with interest. She was being tested, but she wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Granted." "They are a peaceful species. Their entire culture is built around collective harmony and mutual aid. If they discover that their rescue was part of a larger political strategy, it could destroy their faith in cooperation. That would be a tragedy beyond the loss of life they've already experienced." Studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your concern for our rescued civilians is noted, Commander, but you should consider this. The Hegemony has been conducting raids like the one on throughout this sector for months. If we don't act now, how many more mining stations, how many more innocent families will be destroyed?" Before Sarah could respond, an alarm chimed softly throughout the bridge. "Admiral," called the tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony Fleet Command. High-priority diplomatic channel." His expression didn't change, but Sarah caught a flash of something, anticipation perhaps, on screen. The main display shimmered, revealing an alien face that made Sarah's blood run cold. The Hegemony commander was one of the apex predator species that dominated the galactic government. Its reptilian features were from countless battles, and its eyes held the cold intelligence of a born killer. "I am Fleet Commander of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Group," the alien spoke, its words translated into emotionless human speech. "Human vessel, you are in violation of territorial boundaries established by the Accords. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Stepped forward, his posture radiating calm confidence. "Fleet Commander, I am Admiral of the Terran Defense Force. We responded to a distress call from a civilian mining station under attack by your raiders. We have refugees aboard and will not abandon them to die." His face twisted into what might have been a smile. "The mining station was conducting illegal operations in Hegemony space. Our response was within legal parameters. Your presence here is not. The station had proper mining permits filed with the Galactic Commerce Council. Your raiders attacked without provocation, killing over 11,000 civilians and destroying infrastructure worth billions of credits. His voice never rose, but authority rang in every word. That constitutes multiple violations of the Accords. The commander's eyes narrowed. You play dangerous games, human. Your small fleet may have achieved surprise, but we have battle groups throughout this sector. Stand down now, and we may be willing to discuss reparations. Almost smiled. Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let me clarify our position. He gestured to the tactical officer, and the bridge displays changed to show fleet positions throughout the sector. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw the true scope of the human deployment. Not one battle group, but 5, positioned at strategic points throughout the region. As of 6 hours ago, Terran Defense Force vessels have secured 12 systems previously under hegemony control. We have evidence of systematic raids against civilian populations, illegal mining operations, and slave trading in violation of 17 separate galactic treaties. This isn't a rescue mission, Commander. His gray eyes locked onto the alien's reptilian gaze through the transmission. This is a liberation campaign. The weight of truth. The transmission ended with snarled threats echoing in the sudden silence of the bridge. Sarah stared at the tactical displays, trying to process the scope of what she was seeing. 12 systems, thousands of ships. This wasn't just a military operation, it was a complete restructuring of the galactic power balance. Commander, Admiral said quietly, I need you to escort our refugees to their temporary quarters. They'll want to hear about resettlement options from someone they trust. Sarah nodded, but her mind was reeling. As she left the bridge, she caught fragments of urgent communication between and his staff. Words like Phase 2, occupation forces, and provisional government drifted through the air like harbingers of something vast and irreversible. The refugee quarters were located in the indomitable civilian sections, areas that had clearly been designed with non-human inhabitants in mind. The lighting could be adjusted for species with different visual spectrums, and the atmospheric controls could handle everything from methane-breathing crystalline beings to aquatic species that needed high humidity. Sarah found Al in the main gathering area, surrounded by other elders. They were speaking in their native language, but their body language conveyed exhaustion and worry despite their rescue. Sarah, Al approached as she entered. The elder's crystalline skin had regained most of its healthy blue coloration, though stress lines still flickered across her features. The human medical staff says we are all recovering well, but there are questions. What kind of questions? About what happens next. Where do we go? Our home is destroyed, our mining collective dissolved. Some of the younger are talking about joining human colonies, but the elders, she gestured helplessly with her 4 thin arms. We have lived among the stars for 3 generations, but always as part of the hegemony economic structure. We do not know how to exist outside of it. Sarah's heart sank. This was exactly what she'd feared. The human military intervention had saved the survivors, but it had also ripped away the only life they'd ever known. Al, there's something I need to tell you about why the human ships were able to respond so quickly. The elder's compound eyes focused on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. We have wondered about this. The distance from human space is too great for normal travel. Before Sarah could continue, her comm unit chimed with an incoming message. All civilian consultants report to Briefing Room 7 for resettlement coordination, came Lieutenant's voice. Sarah looked at Al apologetically. Can we talk after the briefing? There are things you need to know, but I want to make sure I have all the facts first. Of course, but Sarah, Al placed a crystalline hand on her shoulder. Whatever the truth is, we are grateful to be alive. Do not let guilt burden you unnecessarily. The briefing room was filled with human civilians, technical specialists, cultural advisors, and administrative personnel who'd apparently been stationed throughout the fleet. Sarah recognized the type, people like herself who'd left military service but retained enough expertise to be valuable in complex operations. Lieutenant stood at the front of the room next to a holographic display showing various star systems. Ladies, and thank you for your patience during the evacuation phase. Now we need to discuss the next stage of Operation Sanctuary. Sarah's blood went cold. Operations had names. That meant this had been planned. As you're aware, we've successfully secured 12 systems previously under hegemony control. Our primary mission now is stabilization and integration. Each of you will be assigned to specific worlds or stations to help coordinate the transition from hegemony administration to Terran protectorate status. A woman near the front raised her hand. Lieutenant, what about the existing governments on these worlds? Are we talking about military occupation or cooperative transition? Each situation is unique, replied smoothly. Some worlds have already requested Terran protection. Others will require more. Persuasive diplomacy. Your job is to ensure that civilian populations understand the benefits of human administration while respecting their cultural autonomy. Sarah felt sick. She'd heard this kind of language before, during her military service in the outer colonies. It was the vocabulary of conquest dressed up in humanitarian terms. What about species like the, Sarah asked, refugees who lost everything, where do they fit into this transition? His expression softened slightly. The survivors will have multiple options. They can resettle in human space as permanent residents, remain in this sector under Terran protection, or we can help establish a new colony world specifically for their use. Commander, given your relationship with the survivors, we'd like you to serve as their primary liaison. The offer was generous, and Sarah could see the logic behind it. But it still felt like manipulation, using her genuine care for them to make them compliant with whatever larger agenda was at play. I'll need to discuss the options with Elder Al and the other community leaders, Sarah said carefully. Of course, take all the time you need. We're not in the business of forcing people into situations they don't want. As the briefing continued, Sarah found herself thinking about Admiral's words on the bridge. The hegemony had been conducting raids throughout the sector for months. If the humans hadn't acted, how many more stations would have been destroyed? But that raised another question. How long had the humans been planning this operation? Had they been waiting for an excuse, or had they genuinely been motivated by humanitarian concerns? After the briefing, Sarah made her way back to the refugee quarters, her mind churning with conflicting emotions. She found Al in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars through a massive viewport. Others moved quietly through the space, their crystalline forms catching the light like living prisms. The human officers have been very kind, Al said as Sarah approached. They offer us many choices for our future, but I sense there are things you wish to tell me that they do not. Sarah sat beside her friend, choosing her words carefully. Al, I think the humans were already planning military action in this sector. The attack on gave them the legal justification they needed, but this operation, it's much larger than a rescue mission. The elder was quiet for a long moment, her skin flickering with patterns Sarah had learned to recognize as deep thought. You believe we are being used. I believe you were saved by people who genuinely wanted to help you, but I also think that help serves a larger purpose that you weren't told about. Al turned to look at Sarah directly. In the 3 days we waited to die, I had time to think about many things. The hegemony treated us as expendable labor. They cared nothing for our lives or our culture. When the raiders came, they did not even try to minimize casualties. They enjoyed our fear. She gestured toward the other in the lounge. Now we are alive, safe, and offered real choices about our future. If the humans gain some advantage from saving us, does that make our rescue less meaningful? Sarah didn't have an answer for that. Through the viewport, she could see other human ships moving through space with purpose and precision. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was mobilizing to respond to this challenge to their authority. And caught between these two galactic powers were billions of beings who just wanted to live their lives in peace. There's going to be a war, Sarah said quietly. Yes, Al agreed. The question is whether it will be a war to liberate or a war to conquer, and perhaps whether there is truly a difference between the two. The first battle. The Indomitable shuddered under the impact of hegemony plasma fire, and emergency lighting bathed the refugee quarters in hellish red. Sarah grabbed Al's arm as artificial gravity fluctuated, sending several sliding across the deck. All civilians to emergency stations, came Admiral's voice over the ship's communication system. We are engaging enemy forces. This is not a drill. Sarah helped the families secure themselves in the reinforced emergency alcoves designed for combat situations. The ship's designers had clearly anticipated that civilians might need protection during military operations. Another detail that suggested this rescue mission had been planned long in advance. How many ships? Al asked, her crystalline skin flickering with stress patterns as another impact shook the deck. "I don't know." Sarah activated a wall display, calling up tactical information available to civilian personnel. What she saw made her stomach clench with fear. The hegemony had responded with overwhelming force. 3 full battle groups, over 60 ships, had surrounded the human fleet. The Indomitable and her escorts were outnumbered nearly 4-1. "Sarah," came a small voice from behind her. She turned to see Al's daughter clutching a stuffed animal that one of the human crew had given her. "Are we going to die?" Before Sarah could answer, Lieutenant's voice came through the comm system. "Commander, report to Battle Bridge immediately." Sarah looked at Al, who nodded understanding. "Go, we will care for each other here." The Battle Bridge was a smaller, more heavily armored command center designed to function if the main bridge was damaged. Admiral stood at its center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation in real time. His calm demeanor hadn't changed, despite facing impossible odds. "Admiral," Sarah approached cautiously. "Commander, I need you to coordinate civilian evacuations if we lose main life support. Your relationship with the survivors makes you the logical choice to prevent panic." Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to the tactical displays. The human ships were moving in patterns she didn't recognize, not the standard formation fighting she'd learned in military academy, but something more fluid and adaptive. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what's our strategy here? We're massively outnumbered." His gray eyes never left the displays. "The hegemony fights like they've always fought, with overwhelming force and traditional tactics. They expect us to either flee or die gloriously in a hopeless battle." Another impact shook the ship, but didn't flinch. "They don't understand that humans have spent the last 20 years studying every engagement they've fought. We know their patterns, their weaknesses, their command structure." On the displays, Sarah watched as human ships suddenly accelerated in seemingly random directions, breaking formation and scattering across the battlefield. The hegemony forces moved to pursue, their massive dreadnoughts turning with ponderous grace to bring their main weapons to bear. That's when the trap was sprung. The scattered human ships had positioned themselves perfectly to create crossfire zones, their advanced targeting systems allowing them to coordinate attacks across impossible distances. More importantly, they'd used their superior speed and maneuverability to force the hegemony ships into positions where they couldn't support each other effectively. "Terran vessels, execute Phoenix Protocol," said calmly into his comm. Sarah watched in amazement as the human fleet seemed to transform. Ships that had appeared to be fleeing suddenly revealed their true positions, striking at hegemony vessels from angles their enemies hadn't anticipated. The Indomitable itself unleashed a barrage of fire that tore through a hegemony cruiser's shields like they were made of paper. "How is this possible?" Sarah whispered. "Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptability and innovation over raw firepower," explained, never taking his eyes off the battle. "The hegemony has better shields, stronger armor, more ships, but they've been fighting the same way for 3 centuries. We've been preparing for this specific engagement for 2 years." 2 years. Sarah felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. This wasn't a response to recent hegemony aggression. This was a carefully planned military campaign that had been in development since before she'd even taken the consulting job on. "The mining stations," she said suddenly. "The raids throughout the sector, you knew they were going to happen." Finally looked at her directly. "We knew the hegemony was escalating their activities. We positioned assets to respond when they finally crossed the line." "But you didn't warn anyone. 11,000 died on because you needed them to attack first." The battle bridge fell silent except for the sounds of combat. Every crew member within earshot was listening to the exchange, waiting to see how their admiral would respond to what amounted to an accusation of allowing genocide for strategic advantage. His expression didn't change. "Commander, if we had warned the mining stations, the hegemony would have known we were monitoring their operations. They would have changed tactics, disappeared back into the bureaucracy, and continued their raids for years while we lacked legal justification to intervene. How many more would have died during those years?" Sarah wanted to argue, but another display caught her attention. The hegemony fleet was in full retreat, their formation broken, and several ships trailing atmosphere and debris. The human fleet had achieved complete tactical victory with minimal losses. Incoming transmission, called the communication officer. It's Fleet Commander again. On screen, the commander's face appeared on the main display, but his earlier arrogance had been replaced by something Sarah had never seen in a hegemony officer: respect. Admiral said, his translated voice carrying grudging admiration. Your tactics were unexpected. We withdraw our forces from this engagement, but do not mistake this for surrender. The hegemony has resources you cannot imagine. Nodded slightly. Fleet Commander, I hope your government will consider negotiating a peaceful resolution to this conflict. The Terran Federation has no desire to rule over other species, but